Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's going to be watching. I'm going to give a moment for people to join on here. The name of this video is titled When Half Your Identity is Missing and the Two, Duality, are always one, but one can never be one. That's the title of this video. In this video, I would like to better explain how many of us are seeking for answers, purpose, meaning, who we are, what we are, and so I would just like to better lead people into what I feel to be the answer. But first you have to acknowledge the fact that half your identity is missing. And this message may not apply to all, this message may not resonate with all, but for those who speak this language, this message is for you. For those who are at night staring up at the stars, staring up at the sky, constantly waiting for something out there, this message is for you. And if this does resonate with you, I'd very much appreciate it if you could just share the video. Share the video in a group or on your page. Just let other people maybe get the message as well through your platform. I appreciate that. So I've said this many times, we all share the same space. So we're all sharing the same space and this journey, but not all of us are taking in the same information and not all of us are sharing the same experience. So just because someone is sharing the same space as you does not mean that they are sharing the same experience with you. And half of our identity is established through the internal body. As we grow up from birth, we begin to establish this identity for ourselves of who we are, what we are, but this is strictly based on the character, based on the body. And so we don't realize at that beginning point that half of our identity is in fact missing. And another thing we don't realize is that half of who your internal character becomes, half of what you identify as within, is half based on your external experience. And this is what I'm going to get into. The external universe is the other half of your identity, which is helping you establish who you are. And even if you have not been aware that the external universe is just as much you as what you call you, does not mean it hasn't played a role. So for instance, and I posted a status about this yesterday, so I wanted to further cover this topic. But for somebody who grew up with a silver spoon, let's just say, we'll use that term. Someone who grew up with the silver spoon, they will base their experience not just on their internal thoughts and self, but they will base their experience of identity on their external reality. So that is half of what determines who they are. That is half of what gives them a sense of identity. So their attitude may be, this world's a beautiful place, people are loving, kind, whatnot. Then you take someone who's maybe born into poverty or in a rough area. Their external experience has shown them very different than someone born into a silver spoon. So a part of their internal experience or their identity is influenced and determined based on that external experience that they had. And that's what you will identify as or with and carry with you. Because our internal body is not just what we are the external as well. And that's why I say the two are always one, but one can never be one. So for the term all is one, all is one, all is one, I say this all the time. But we have to know that I'm trying to clarify the definition of all is one, because although we are all one, we will never appear as one thing. Because one is not anything at all. One is what you would call void. One is what you would call source. But source is not an identity. What we're calling God is not an identity. And this is something that Alan Watts has covered in his videos, who is a great inspiration to me. Alan Watts has said that the Godhead can never be the head of its own knowledge, just as a knife doesn't cut itself, because by us being this internal organism, we evoke the external universe into being. So a knife cannot cut you without you having a skin, a soft skin. So just as a knife doesn't cut itself, the Godhead can never be ahead of its own knowledge. In other words, cannot just be itself, because one is never in fact one. It always has to appear split or separate from itself. So we are what we're calling God, taking in ourselves through this experience, through the established identity which we are creating through the internal and external joining together. And whether you are aware that the external and internal are both you does not matter. You do not need to know this to have the experience. However, it greatly helps to answer the questions of who and what you are beyond this character, beyond this body. Especially for those, including myself, like 6 years back, I was obsessed and infatuated with looking up at the sky and looking up at the stars and studying this, but viewing it as something foreign to myself. Not once did I ever identify with the external world, the external universe. Not once did I ever identify with the sun, the moon, the stars, or anything. Instead, I was trying to study them like they were something far beyond and foreign to me. And as I stated in my last live video, the sun and the moon are no different than your two pair of lenses right here, which are the back of your two eyes that you could never possibly see. And this is why the sun and the moon only have one face to them. We've only ever seen one face to the sun and the moon. And that is why, because you are looking at the back of your eyes, which you could never possibly see. And I don't mean you're looking into the back of your eyes from your physical being here. But whether you want to think bigger, on a grander scale into the macrocosm, or think smaller into the microcosm, either way you go, bigger or smaller, is still a universe, is still consciousness, and is still a being in some form, whether you want to call it a human form or another form. It's still taking a form the same way we are taking a form, and you will always be in the middle, in the median of the higher and lower. And this is what Alan Watts has said, that every incarnation is just like this one. You will always appear in the middle because you have to. You will always appear in the middle, meaning you will always have an idea of a less power and a greater power, an above and a below. You know, left and right, this and that. There's always going to be two things, but you will always be the one in the middle. So whether you think bigger and go out there into the universe and try and find, you know, a bigger form, a bigger person, a bigger universe, it's still you, but to that being taking shape, it's in the middle just as you're in the middle right now. So what I'm trying to say is when you think bigger, that universe has an even bigger universe and an even bigger universe and a bigger universe and a bigger universe, and each one is in the middle just as we're in the middle right here and now. Because every incarnation is just like this one. Every incarnation is us asking the same questions, but never having the same experience. Now, I've used this example before, and I'm going to use it again because it seems to be very effective and very versatile in audience. In all audiences, people seem to relate to this message the way I relate. So I'm going to stick to this one here. So right out of the gate, this is where we are. But as I said, one can never be one. So we are all one. This is something that has never changed as far back as you look into history. the story will always change because the consciousness behind the user is always changing and evolving, because we are not the physical form we are taking in. We are the source of consciousness itself. So as much as the story wants to change, it will always remain the same. We are one. All is one. But we need to better understand what that means. When you are in the space of one, outside of your body, there is no universe and there is no body. So when you are one, everything is you and nothing is separate. Now, really take in that for a second. Every single thing, everything, that doesn't separate anything at all. Everything is here. So for everything to be one is no identity at all, is no consciousness as we know it. It is an energy which keeps the perpetual state of on and off going. It's what keeps the entire thing going, on and off. And through this duality, or the dual principle, we are becoming self-aware of ourselves as this one energy. And just as everything is in duality, so is the very human brain. Our human brain is split right down the middle, and you have two sides which most human beings will play against each other, will try and have one side dominate the other side. For example, I'll use myself. 5 years ago, I was dominant on I believe it's the left side. I was dominant on logic and facts, because one side is logic and facts and numbers, what you can prove, and the other side is the exact opposite, which is the imagination, things you cannot prove, fairy tales, make-believe. And that's what we're doing. We're putting one side of the brain against the other, and we're saying it's either faith or fact. And they both can't be right. It has to be one or the other. But we do not realize the two polar opposites that are being created, which is above and below, are really one and the same. But you cannot have everything be one, because as one, it does not exist. You can only know I can only know myself as a body, which is the inside. Let me include that. And I know this is backwards, but when I upload this on my YouTube, I'm going to flip the writing so it will be right side up. So if you have me on YouTube, just check out the video on there. My YouTube channel is Red Pill Rabbit Hole. And this video will probably be up in the next 2-3 hours. So just work with me for now. But in order to know what I call my body, which is the inside of something, the inside of any surface, I have to know something in relation to, which appears separate. It has to appear separate, because the two are always one, but one is nothing at all. One is never one. So that gives you the internal body and the external universe. So now you have an inside to an outside. And this is what will establish your identity of yourself as this right here. Because remember, it appears, and I know for some people who don't speak my language here, they think I'm absolutely nuts and I'm berserk, you know? People who are new to this are going to say, this guy's an idiot, because I'm clearly traveling in my body. I'm going from point A to point B, but that is the very point. No pun intended, that is the point. You are here and you've never left, but in order to begin anywhere at all and understand infinity, you have to have a starting point of an inside, which allows you to evoke the outside. You have to have a beginning which interprets an end. Point A to point B. So you have to arrive here to make it there, to eventually realize that you've never left the point. It felt as if beyond a doubt you were traveling outside of your body or in your body through places, because the physical place changes, the setting changes, the people changes, but that is the very trick of the game. That is the very Ouroboros, which is the snake devouring its own tail. You arriving from point A to make it to point B to realize you have never left here, which is what you call source or what you call God. But God is the very source of this energy, allowing us to become an internal and external being, to establish the very identity which we know as. And so with the body comes the conscious idea of being finite. We evoke the finite principle into being by simply being the body, because we arrive here and die there, point A to point B, and that right away lets you know what being finite is all about, what being finite is. Because if we are truly infinite, an infinite energy, beyond any physical form, then the only way we could ever experience ourselves as this infinite energy is through its very opposite, which is being a finite being, taking a form, a shape. And also, when you are infinite, you have no edges, you have nothing holding you into a form. You're everywhere, all things are you. So by being just a finite being and taking a form, I now have edges to myself, to what I call me. And it separates the internal being from the external universe. And so by being this, I evoke the entire universe into being. And so many convince themselves that our internal experience and our internal thoughts are all we are. This is just what we are. But we do not make the connection that we are only half this and in relation to the external universe. The external experience is what also establishes your identity. And so by being finite or appearing finite, it allows you to not only grasp something such as point A to point B, birthing to death, an identity. It allows you to establish an identity between point A and point B, but it also gives you the polar opposite conscious idea, which is infinity. Infinity. And this word infinity is what I feel all religions and all spiritual journeys and knowledge has come from. People, this is what the churches have gotten their ideas from. This is what the spirituality community has been birthed from the idea alone of being infinite. We as finite beings have been trying to grasp the meaning of infinity for so long, and just the fact that something can go on forever and ever and ever and ever is mind-blowing to some people in the finite sense. And the first question you pose to yourself when you're in the finite lens is, what started this? What began this? Where at what point did the universe begin? If we are infinite, where's the beginning, the starting point? And that's the very trick of viewing infinity through the finite lens. As long as you are looking at infinity through finite lenses, you will never understand, because you are trying to cling on to a beginning and an end. And that's the very chaos of our nature, is we are infinity. There is nothing to hold on to. When I appear here and now, I have a sense of identity, a meaning, a purpose, because I appear from here to there. I have birthed here to eventually make it there. So I have something to hold on to here. I have my identity to hold on to here. I have my body to hold on to. I have all these ideas which I call myself to hold on to. But when you exit the body and the universe become one and the same, what you once called me no longer exists. Because the experience that you are having is borrowed, and so is the identity you establish with it. Now I'm going to give you a minute to take that in for a second. Really take that in. My greatest fear as a child, you can ask my mother, you can ask my grandmother. At 6 years old, I would wake up crying in an absolute rage of just sadness and fear. Because I was already thinking, where do we go when we die? And it's not uncommon. Most children have more alive imaginations and minds than we think. But I was asking very early, where do we go when we die? And I was just being told, the answer that they had been told, and they had been told, and they had been told. So they weren't wrong for that. They were trying to comfort me. But I knew it wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right. It didn't sit right. It didn't make sense. Logical sense. And that was at 6 years old. So not being able to answer that question is what led me into a journey of seeking, of understanding, of wanting to know why. Because the question I had was, where do we go when we die? What happens? And that's the very answer. Some people think, well, I die and go nowhere forever and ever and ever and ever. And that was my greatest fear, is being in nowhere forever. Being nowhere forever, just void. Nothing. But the truth of the matter is, again, with the dual principle, where you have on, you have off. Where you have awake, you have sleep. And where you have life, you have death. But you only know one in relation to the other. And the truth of the matter is, both of these phases, which appear different and separate, are in fact one. So the only thing there truly is what we call life. Whether you are asleep or awake, you are alive. You are alive. There's life. There's a conscious experience. Whether it's subconscious, or conscious, it is still conscious. And that's the very trick, is all there is life. You never die and go nowhere. It is impossible, because this energy can never be destroyed. It can transform, it can mutate, it can whatever. It can change its form, it can change its whatever meaning, its purpose, its story, but it will always feature in the same thing, which all is one. All is one, because this is what we are. Everything is life. There is no death. There's no such thing as death. The only thing that dies is your physical character, which you are pretending to be, and as I said, is a borrowed experience. What you call me is an established identity through your journey. As you progress in your journey of life, you establish the sense of identity through your internal and external being. And again, one evokes the other. So by having an external outside world that I can study and view, I can now know and separate what I call myself. So I can tell myself very early on, none of this is me. This is me right here and now. This is me. This is all I am in my thoughts. Nothing else. But what we do not realize is that the external experience is just as much you in relation to the internal. Your external is half of your identity as well as the internal. Because we base a lot of our, we base a lot of our internal thoughts and ideas on the external experience we are having. So it shouldn't be hard to figure out, when you're honest with yourself, that this is really just as much what you are as this. You're basing half of your identity internally with your own thoughts on your external experience. When you go out into public and you view people, you're studying people, you're watching people, you're studying phenomenon as it happens, you are studying and taking in yourself. And you are basing who you are based on your external experience, which will influence and shape your thoughts accordingly. And if any of this message resonates with you, just please feel free to share this video for me. Help me out. Help me get this video into a slightly larger audience. That's awesome. I appreciate everyone who shares my content. If the message resonates. So instantly, I've covered body and the finite experience, which brings into being the universe and infinite principle. So with that also comes me, which is the body, as I said. You tell yourself, just this is me, I'm separate from everything outside of me, so only this is me, my thoughts, my body, myself, this is me. And so what is appearing separate, which is the universe, the outside, also brings into relation you. And that's the very trick. One is never one. All is one, but we can never appear as one thing. If I am just what I call me, then I am just right here. There is nothing to know in relation to another. In order to know what I call myself, I have to have something different than myself, which is where you come into being. You. And it's the very same thing as if you were saying it. You are what you call me. And everyone else, in relation to me, the opposite would be you. Or me. And so, we appear separate, absolutely, because we have to. The internal and external appear separate because they have to. And that's what I think scares most people, is the two in fact becoming one. And it's the same thing with what you would call a higher self, which is up here, the higher self, and the lower self. It's the very same thing. You're posing the idea to yourself that you have a higher self and a lower self, and you're also posing the idea that you have to connect to this higher self or lower self. You have to do something to make it here. You have to meditate or do something to make it here. But the truth is, those are games you're playing with yourself. You're creating a white rabbit like Alice in Wonderland did to catch, and when you catch it, you feel you've attained your knowledge. You feel you've attained what it is you seek. But the truth of the matter is, you are here, and you've never left. So it's been you the entire time, and that is the snake devouring its tail, is the infinite realization that it is you the entire time. Alan Watts never died, nor did Terence McKenna. The idea of them in a physical form dissolved, which was a borrowed experience, and that incarnation is just as much me as this one here and now, just as it was you. It's all of us, not just me, all of us. Terence McKenna was a borrowed identity, which was a thought. All of our identities are thoughts that we are playing out and identifying with. Tyler Ugaldi is no different than a thought, a character that I am living out and experiencing myself through and establishing this identity for. Just as I did with Terence McKenna, with Alan Watts, with Nikola Tesla, with Walter Russell, Manly P. Hall, any big name you can ever think about. And again, it's not just me, it was you. It's all of us, because we are this. We are the source. And we are what separates me and you, body from universe. And that's why I've said before, time, what we call time, is a record or memory. And we do not exist in time because time doesn't exist. Our character exists in time. And that's why time doesn't exist, because time is no more real than the character you are playing out and living through. And that's why they say time doesn't exist, because our characters exist in the record or memory we call time. It's just like a video game. When you put in the memory card, and you save your data. It is the very same thing with time. Time is that memory card or that record that you put in to upload your experience to and save so that you never truly died. People can still look up Alan Watts, Terence McKenna's talks and hear their voice because they never died. The thought of them in a physical form is what passed on. They were playing out a character just as you and me are right here and now. And we fail to make the connection with most of these people that we put on pedestals because we fail to realize they were us. And I'm not saying anyone should be put on a pedestal, but some people we hold with high regards. I mean, Alan Watts has been my inspiration since a child. So that's all I mean by that. But we fail to make the connection with these men, and their message is all pretty much the same. We're all one consciousness. It's all one mind. We fail to make the connection with them because we fail to realize they were just as much what we call me or self as you are right here and now. But you have to appear separate from them. You have to appear different or other than in order to know them at all. It's the same thing with you and me. In order to experience you, I have to know me and appear separate and distinct so that I can know these are my thoughts, what I call mine, and those are your thoughts, which you call you. This is my experience and that is your experience. And although we're sharing the same space, we are not taking in the same experience. We're not having the same experience. And this is why you could give 100 people a recipe, and all of them will cook the same thing, but different. This is why you could sit people into a movie theater, have them watch the same film, and all of them explain it in a different way. Because every single person is a different pair of lenses. Everyone is filtering what they are taking in through their internal and external self. And you can only become as self-aware as you are of the self. So, if you are unaware that the external universe is still just as much a part of you as the internal, then that is how self-aware you will become. So signs from the universe will not be signs from yourself. They will be signs from a foreign identity or a foreign deity or something beyond you. And some people will call things that happen fate. But these are people who aren't actually living. They are still asleep. Because they are playing the game of pretending, and they have not yet become that conscious creator which they wait for and seek and think are actually pulling the strings and manipulating what is happening here. Whether you're happy and having a happy experience or a bad experience, you are having experience. And some people may not like that I say this, but that is the very purpose. This knowledge has taught me to embrace everything. Even when I am in pain, even when I'm in sadness, it does not matter. If I am conscious, that's what I am. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad, truly. There's just consciousness. There is just experience. As long as you are having an experience, you are the universe becoming aware of itself. And again, some people may not like that. I had some people get very angry at my watch party I hosted yesterday in a group saying that, I'm glad dementia and Alzheimer's and all this stuff doesn't exist. I'm so glad you're saying that. And I'm saying, try not to be so shallow-minded. Think beyond what you're trying to say. And these are people who are approaching this with hostility because they have not yet accepted themselves as the conscious creator. So, they refuse to take responsibility for all things that are happening. All things. And that is a pill that some people just do not want to swallow. Because that means you are responsible for all the darkness, all the bad that happens. But you are also that other principle in relation to it, which is love and good. But again, in order for you to understand what darkness is and think, okay, that's not good, I want to stay away from that, you have to know the opposite of good and love. And that's where you can choose. I want to feel good or I want to feel bad. But the hardest thing that some people can do is take responsibility and accept, I am creating my reality. And of course, to a certain degree, it does not mean that when you incarnate into a new being, you choose, okay, on this person I'm going to give myself Alzheimer's, I'm going to give myself a broken leg, I'm going to give myself this, I'm going to give myself that. You're not choosing this, so people aren't damned by fate. This isn't a choosing, something we choose. It's a part of the experience becoming self-aware. Whether it be good or bad, it is consciousness. And every single veil is still one person. That's what we're forgetting. It's all you. So when you hurt another, you hurt yourself. If you kill another, you are killing yourself. And my personal belief is, for the killers out there, because some people think, well, there's no punishment, there's no anything for what we do. There absolutely is, because you're only doing it to yourself. So what greater punishment do you need other than you hurting yourself? That is your punishment. My belief is that if you kill, you have to incarnate that next time into that experience of the victim, meaning you will murder yourself, but you will not appear, obviously, to know I am the murderer. You will experience death through being murdered, and you will have no idea. I killed myself. That was me. And that's just my personal belief. I'm not saying that's true indefinitely or what have you, but that's the greatest thing I can think of as far as karma. There has to be some form of punishment or some form of something, right? There gets no greater punishment than you hurting yourself. And just like Addie said, life has no meaning, you give it meaning. Through establishing your identity, internally and externally, that identity that you establish creates the meaning. If you do not know who you are, you cannot fully know your meaning or your purpose. By knowing who you are and what you are, brings your meaning and purpose into being. It makes it so much more clear why you are here. And that's why we're here, to simply understand, to experience. But some people want to either play God or play the victim. And the truth is you are right here. You are consciousness. You are both roles. And this statement alone is what... This is the biggest sin in religion, is to say the words, I am God. In religion, that is blasphemy. That is absolutely the greatest sin you can possibly say. And it's only because religion is a game. Religion is a forget game that you are playing with yourself. Religion is people who are pretending that they are not. For people who are awaiting a Savior, but swearing they are not it. Religions keep people stuck in a perpetual state of fear, and that's why these people come back to them every Sunday and they pay them their money, because this is a business and they are keeping you in a vulnerable state of mind, and they are also keeping you in your own way. They're not trying to get you out of your own way, they're keeping you in your own way, so you have to come back and you have to pay them your money. Tax-free. It is a tax-free business. And this is why we're seeing churches and new religions pop up all over. But in relation to that, we're also seeing a spiritual rise happening out here. It seems like spirituality is now a new trend. People are starting to want to go into spirituality, which is a good thing, because that means you are ready to do the inner work. You are ready to become the creator. You are ready to take responsibility for all things. In fear alone, and I've said this before, I will say it again, the only thing keeping religion from collapsing is fear. Fear. Fear is what fuels religion. If there was no fear, or that fear was seen into, religions would collapse overnight. Nobody would be filling their buildings. Nobody would be paying them their money. And this is why people go to spiritual gurus, because the guru is someone you think has an answer for you, just like you think the church has your answer. But the guru does not keep you in a low frequency, or it keeps you in your own way. The guru takes you to the answer you seek and pushes you into it. And when you are ready, the guru disappears, to leave you thinking, was that guru even real, or was it just myself? And that's the very trick. You're supposed to realize you are your own guru. You were the guru the whole time. And that's why when the master is ready, he disappears from the student. Because the master and the student are no different. And a master truly knows you're always the student. You're always the student because you're never done growing and learning. You're never done experiencing. So there really is no difference between a master and a student other than the student thinks the master has some grand answer. And the only answer is you. You. You are the answer. But religions want to complicate things and put the answer as something here or there or into a form. And the truth of the matter is, this realization is how man has become immortal throughout antiquity, throughout history. It's been said many times that man has become immortal. And people are trying to figure out how. Well, it's not a literal term. This is an occult or esoteric philosophy. Man becomes immortal through the realization of infinity beyond his character. This is how Enoch became Metatron. Enoch didn't ascend into a Metatron and become an angel with wings. This is a metaphor. Enoch became Metatron through the realization of infinity because he broke the veil and saw himself beyond his character. And that's how we become God. That is how a human being becomes God or Christ consciousness. And that is the same thing as the Kundalini ascension or the Kundalini rising, where the two serpents rise up the pillar or your spine. And it's those two serpents are the two sides of your brain from my experience. Your two sides of your brain are split. In the middle is the median. And the median is your pineal gland and the spine. So those two serpents are the two hemispheres of your brain intertangling and then joining together into a single unity to light up your third eye or your pineal gland, which allows you to, for once, not put one side of the brain against the other side and think you have to have one side dominate the other. Instead, you are seeing into the mirror, the median. You are seeing into the mirror and seeing that this side is no different than this side. And the only thing that's made them different was that very median. If this is the middle of my brain, this is my pineal gland right here, the only thing separating God from a human being is the source. Where did these ideas come from? Where did these characters come from? What makes God a different character than the character of Tyler? And that's where you can say to yourself, what I wrote here, well, God is infinite, and our character is finite. But just as I've covered, you can only know a finite experience in relation to an infinite being, or energy, and vice versa. You can only take in or consciously know an infinite energy by having a finite experience. Thus, you are a human being becoming God. Whether you know it or not, you are fulfilling your purpose. Whether you remember or you still have forgotten, you are fulfilling your purpose. You are establishing an identity and experience for yourself which you could never know in the space of one, because one is never one. You need two states to appear separate and opposite in order to take in what we call this one, which is what most call God or Source. So one is never one. Although we are all one, one will never appear as one because the one is no identity at all. You need duality to establish the identity and have any experience at all. And that's what we are doing here. We are playing the game, the ultimate illusion of separation. Separation is the ultimate illusion. And this is something I've said for years now. But if you can conceptualize it, and what I mean by that, if you can conceptualize, form an idea, form an opinion, form a philosophy, form anything in your mind, even if it's somebody who's passed on and dead. Like me, for instance, I just shared my grandfather's poem from a year ago. He passed away 2 years ago. Although he appears to be gone, he lives through me because I can conceptualize him. He's physically gone, but if I can conceptualize him in my mind, he lives through me. And that's the very trick. Nothing is separate from you. Every single thing is consciousness. But they have to appear separate. Beyond the form, beyond any form, every single thing is one. But the reason we will never find the one, or as some religions want to, post this deity for you, the reason you will never find the one is because you need two, duality, to become aware of what you call the one or God. You need to appear as a human being to have any idea of a greater power which you call God. By me appearing as a human being, I can have an idea of what I call God. And that is what separates me, is my idea, my thought, my experience, which establishes my identity. And that's the very trick, is every single thing you will ever appear as, in this incarnation or the next, every single thing you will ever appear as, is not in fact what you are. And that's the maddening part. What you can never appear as is everything that you truly are, is your very nature. But our very nature, as Terence McKenna has said, is chaos, ultimate chaos, because we're not here and we're not there. We are nowhere. Things are just happening, and we're defining them and making them make sense. But the truth of the matter is no one knows a damn thing, including myself. We're defining things and trying to make them make sense. Because chaos is our true nature. And that's why NASA is trying to pose the idea that they have a picture of where we're at, and we're here, and we're in this location, here and now, and this is where we're going. They don't have any damn idea, nor do we. Nor do you. Because the truth of the matter is, this experience, this shared experience here, is a collective consciousness, is a network we're connecting to, where the body exists inside the mind of the game. So as I said, although we are sharing the same space, we are not sharing the same experience. So what you call self and what I call self are two completely different things. Because I may be more self-aware or less self-aware than you. So, our experience we are having is based on our level of self-awareness. So if someone is more or less self-aware, that will be the experience that they have and create here and now. So we can share the same space, but we are not all sharing and creating the same experience, because while we are all the singular self, which we are establishing an identity through, remember, this is what we are, this is the singular self, the singularity, whatever you would like to call it. Well, we are all the singular self, we are all decorating or establishing a different identity and experience through this singular self. And I use the word decorated because I've said before, it's just like a car, Some people have cars, they want to put rims on them, or they want to, put a new bumper on it, or fix the motor up, You're decorating this, the same way you're decorating your character, your identity, your vessel. So we're all establishing a different identity through the singular self, but we're all still one beyond the form and what we call self. Because what we are appearing as, we are truly not. It is a borrowed experience. And that is why when we die, I do not die. My character, which was a thought in the brain, is what passes on. The physical form that I am taking on was never me before my birth. Before I birthed into any form at all and began taking a shape, was not what I was. So it shouldn't be too hard to realize the fact that this is not what I am. Because before I took a form, a shape, I had to come from somewhere. So it shouldn't be too hard to realize this is not in fact what I am. This is a borrowed experience. But that's where the little thing called the ego gets in the way. And some people look into psychedelics to assist them in either killing or seeing beyond that ego. And when I say killing the ego, I do not mean physically dying. I mean your character dying before your very eyes and dissolving into void or source. The same place that established your very ego and created that identity. That median is your mirror. And if you look into a mirror, or I can do this right now because I'm seeing myself, look into a mirror and hold your hand up and then slowly raise it to the mirror, and you will find that your mirror meets you in the middle, meets you in the median. And this is where psychedelics takes you. It establishes the two split sides, one you call God and one you call your character, which you think is really you. It brings you to this mirror, the median, and it joins you two together to realize and see beyond that mirror that you are not in fact either one. These are both created or established identities which you are creating. And it's no different than the higher self and lower self. But remember, every incarnation is this one, so you will always have to appear in the middle. And that's why we have an idea of above and below, higher self, lower self, God and man. Because the truth of the matter is, you're not this one and you're not that one. You're not on this side and you're not on that side. You are in the middle, the median, in the source. The source is what's creating every single thought and idea you've ever had. So, just for you posing the idea that man is different from God, came from the very same source which brought the two separate, which brought the two apart. Source is what separates all things, is what convinces you you are not. But the truth of the matter is, when you get to the bottom of it and look beyond your median or your mirror, you will have joined together all duality which you thought was foreign to you or separate. And that is when your character becomes what you have called God. And it's a realization which allows you to see beyond your veil, break the veil, and become the very conscious creator you once awaited. And just because you get this knowledge does not mean physically things change and things start happening for you. It simply means that you once had an idea or thought of what God should be or could be, but it was not you. By attaining this knowledge, you can now manifest this energy, which you call God, into being through you. So if you thought God was love, or God was blissfulness, or God is this, now's your chance to consciously create that God here and now. If everyone is me and everyone is my mirror, and God is love, then what better way can I serve God or my higher self than to love you, to accept you, to understand you? That's God manifesting itself. And that is the subconscious human being becoming the conscious creator it awaits. That is man becoming immortal like Enoch did Metatron. Exactly, Kenya. Now create that heaven. Exactly right. You're not waiting for a place of heaven or blissfulness. You bring that experience here. You don't wait for it. You bring that state here. Heaven is here because we create it. Hell is here because we create it. But isn't it empowering to know you don't have to wait for anything? You can begin consciously manifesting your creation into reality. You can begin consciously manifesting your idea of God here and now. You can become everything you once thought you were not. And as I said, you have to do nothing to get there. Just see beyond your own median, your own source. Look right into the source. Because the source is what connects everything to everything. Even if it's opposite, completely different, it's still connected through the source, the third eye, which is consciousness itself. It's not right side and it's not left side. It is the two as one. Because the two are always one, but one can never be one. Now, I hope I explained this video very clear for those people who are still seeking, and if this message resonates with you, I'm glad. If you wouldn't mind helping me share this out, I'm going to wrap up this video, but if you wouldn't mind helping me share it, just drop a share on this real quick before you exit off. Thank you. I'll probably do another live next weekend or so, maybe another 2 weeks or so. Me and Addie have another live coming too, for those people who are waiting for that. My YouTube channel is Red Pill Rabbit Hole. If you want to subscribe and check out this video later again. I just quickly want to show this real quick. I meant to show this picture earlier in the video, but you know me. I get sidetracked. But this is what I mean. The two always become one. The two always are one, but one can never be one without something in relation to it. So, and you see your split brain there. You're split into two sides. See the moon eye and the moon eye and the sun eye. See, duality is the principle of all nature. Everything we know is in duality. And these are pillars in India. 1,414 pillars lined up in a row, appearing separate, but at the end of the tunnel, they disappear into the vantage point. And the vantage point is just that. Vantage point. It forms a point. Because you are the very point. You are the one, appearing separate as two. Inside, outside, inside, outside. To know my inside, I have to have an outside, and vice versa. So the two always appear separate, but will always form one point, because we are the very point creating duality. And that's why I said, look beyond your median or mirror, because when you look beyond that, you will find the only thing separating this side from that side was the very point you refused to look at. And there's the Freemason pillars right there. Two erect pillars with the little source lit up. And you notice their source resembles mine a little bit. Alright. If you have any questions on this video or anything at all, feel free to message me. Subscribe on YouTube, Red Pill Rabbit Hole. And have a conscious day. Thank you.